Let me be direct with you from the outset, because what unfolded in Rabat, Morocco over the past 72 hours is not a diplomatic conference. It is not another round of Arab League discussions that will fade into bureaucratic obscurity. What we witnessed is a fundamental reorganization of North African and Middle Eastern power structures. And if you are not paying attention to the specific agreements signed, the financial commitments made, and the military cooperation frameworks established, you are missing the most significant geopolitical shift in the Maghreb region since the Arab Spring. I am looking at joint communiques released by 6 different governments that have been analyzed by regional security experts for the past 48 hours. What these documents reveal is not symbolic cooperation. It is not aspirational partnership language. What they reveal is a coordinated economic and security architecture that fundamentally alters Morocco's position in 3 simultaneous theaters: the Western Sahara dispute, the Mediterranean energy corridor, and the emerging multipolar competition between Washington and Beijing. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why Morocco just became the critical pivot state in North Africa, why the agreements signed this week represent the largest strategic realignment since the Abraham Accords, and why this will affect energy prices, migration patterns, and military deployments across 2 continents. This analysis is based on official government statements, economic data from the African Development Bank, and military cooperation frameworks that have been confirmed by multiple defense ministries. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively discussed in security briefings from Algiers to Washington to Beijing, and you are not getting this level of detail from mainstream coverage. Let's start with geography, because Morocco's location is not coincidental to why this transformation matters. Morocco sits at the northwestern edge of Africa, controlling both Atlantic and Mediterranean coastlines. The Strait of Gibraltar, just 14 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, separates Morocco from Spain. Approximately 100,000 vessels pass through or near Moroccan waters annually. This is not a minor shipping lane. This represents roughly 30% of global maritime trade that transitions between the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. To put that in economic perspective, disruption or control of this corridor affects supply chains for European manufacturing, North African energy exports, and West African commodity shipments simultaneously. Morocco also shares a 1,500-kilometer border with Algeria to the east and controls the disputed Western Sahara territory to the south, a region containing significant phosphate deposits and potential offshore energy reserves. According to the United States Geological Survey, Morocco controls approximately 75% of the world's known phosphate reserves, a critical component in fertilizer production and battery manufacturing. These geographic and resource factors make Morocco strategically valuable to multiple competing powers. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing the significance of Morocco's position is far greater than typically portrayed in Western media coverage. Now, let's talk about what actually happened in Rabat this week and why the timing matters more than the content of most news reports suggests. Between April 14th and April 16th, representatives from 6 countries convened in Morocco's capital: Morocco itself, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, and Pakistan. The official designation was the Rabat Economic and Security Initiative. That title is deliberately bland. What actually occurred was the formalization of 3 separate but interconnected frameworks: a $38 billion infrastructure investment program, a joint military interoperability protocol, and a coordinated diplomatic position on Palestinian statehood and regional security architecture. Announcement number 1, the Infrastructure Investment Program. And this matters more than any other single development because it represents the largest coordinated Arab investment in North Africa in modern history. According to the joint financial statement released by the Saudi Public Investment Fund and confirmed by the UAE's Mubadala Investment Company, the program allocates $38 billion over 7 years across 4 categories. $12 billion for port modernization and expansion, specifically Tangier Med Port Complex and the new Atlantic Deepwater Facility at Dakhla in Western Sahara. $9 billion for renewable energy infrastructure, primarily solar installations in southern Morocco and wind farms along the Atlantic coast. $8 billion for transportation corridors, including rail links connecting Morocco to Mauritania and highway systems integrating Western Sahara into Moroccan infrastructure. $9 billion for technology and industrial zones, with explicit focus on semiconductor component manufacturing and rare earth processing facilities. Bloomberg reported on April 15th that the semiconductor facilities alone represent an attempt to create an Arab-controlled alternative supply chain component outside of Chinese and Taiwanese dominance. The Financial Times described the program as fundamentally altering North African economic geography. The Dakhla port component deserves specific attention. Dakhla sits on the Atlantic coast of Western Sahara, the disputed territory Morocco has controlled since 1975 over Polisario Front objections backed by Algeria. According to Moroccan government projections released this week, the Dakhla Atlantic port will have capacity to handle 5 million 20-foot equivalent container units annually by 2032. For comparison, the current capacity of Tangier Med, Morocco's largest port, is 9 million units. Morocco is not building a supplementary facility. Morocco is building a parallel Atlantic trade gateway that bypasses the Mediterranean entirely for cargo bound to or from West Africa, South America, and North American Atlantic ports. Reuters confirmed on April 16th that the UAE's DP World will operate the facility under a 35-year concession agreement. This is not theoretical investment. This is operational commitment with contracted management. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, the Military Interoperability Protocol. This is the component Western media has barely covered, and it represents a structural shift in regional security cooperation. According to the Joint Defense Framework published by Morocco's Ministry of Defense and confirmed by officials from Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the 6 participating nations have established 3 cooperation mechanisms. First, joint air defense exercises conducted quarterly, rotating between participating nations. Second, intelligence sharing protocols specifically focused on counterterrorism operations targeting Sahel-based militant groups. Third, and this is the critical element, standardized procurement of Chinese and Turkish defense systems to ensure interoperability outside of American or European supply chains. Defense Security Asia reported on April 15th that Morocco has committed to purchasing Chinese HQ-17 air defense systems and Turkish Bayraktar TB2 drones, the same platforms currently operated by Saudi Arabia and the UAE in their respective theaters. Commander Hassan Abouyub, Morocco's Inspector General of the Armed Forces, stated publicly that the interoperability framework represents recognition that regional security cannot depend solely on traditional partnerships that come with political conditionality. That phrasing is diplomatic, but the implication is explicit. Morocco is building military redundancy that reduces dependence on American and French weapon systems that have historically come with demands regarding Western Sahara policy, human rights conditions, and Israeli normalization. Pakistan's participation in this framework is particularly significant. Pakistan brings nuclear-capable military experience and has historically provided training and advisory support to Arab militaries, particularly Saudi Arabia. The inclusion of Pakistani officers in the joint training protocols signals depth of cooperation beyond symbolic military exchanges. Jane's Defense Weekly confirmed that Pakistani advisors will be embedded in the Moroccan Royal Armed Forces Training Command structure beginning in June of this year.
Received.
That is announcement number 2. Stay with me because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the diplomatic component becomes impossible to ignore. Announcement number 3, and this one almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting correctly. The 6 nations jointly endorsed what they termed the Rabat Framework on Palestinian statehood and regional normalization. The language is careful, but the substance is a direct challenge to the current trajectory of Israeli-Palestinian relations and American policy in the region. The framework establishes 3 principles. First, any normalization between Arab states and Israel must be contingent on concrete, irreversible progress toward Palestinian statehood based on 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as capital. Second, Arab states will coordinate economic and diplomatic pressure to achieve this outcome rather than pursuing individual bilateral normalization deals. Third, the framework explicitly welcomes non-Western powers, specifically China, to play mediating roles in achieving regional peace. Think carefully about what this represents. When Morocco, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE jointly publish a diplomatic framework that explicitly conditions future Israeli normalization on Palestinian statehood, that is not aspirational language. These are the 3 Arab nations that either have normalized relations with Israel, as Morocco did in 2020 under the Trump administration, or were actively pursuing normalization, as Saudi Arabia was throughout 2023 and 2024. According to the joint communiqué released on April 16th, the Rabat framework supersedes previous bilateral commitments pending achievement of the stated conditions. Morocco's Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita stated in the closing press conference, and I am quoting him directly here, that Morocco's relationship with Israel will be evaluated continuously against progress on Palestinian rights, and that the days of separating normalization from justice are finished. The Saudi and Emirati foreign ministers stood beside him and affirmed identical positions. This is not symbolic. This is coordinated reversal of the normalization trajectory that defined 2020 through 2023. The Chinese element cannot be separated from this announcement. Wang Yi, China's foreign minister, was not officially present at the Rabat conference, but according to reporting from the South China Morning Post confirmed by Al Jazeera Arabic, Wang Yi conducted virtual meetings with all 6 foreign ministers on April 13th, one day before the conference began. During those meetings, China offered to host a follow-up conference in Beijing focused specifically on implementation mechanisms for the Palestinian statehood conditions. All 6 nations accepted. That conference is scheduled for June, when China positions itself as the primary mediating power for Arab-Israeli peace frameworks, and when major Arab nations accept that role explicitly, that represents a verdict on American credibility and effectiveness in the region. Not ambiguity, not diplomatic nuance, a verdict. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and most analysis is only covering one of them. The first story, the one you will find in most Western media, is that Morocco is hedging its bets, diversifying its partnerships, and playing great powers against each other to maximize its own leverage. This is partially true, but fundamentally incomplete. The second story, the one these agreements actually reveal, is that Morocco has made a strategic assessment that American influence in North Africa and the Middle East is declining structurally, not cyclically, and that the next 20 years will be defined by Chinese economic presence and multipolar security arrangements. Morocco is not hedging. Morocco is repositioning. Consider the evidence. The United States has been Morocco's primary security partner since Moroccan independence. American recognition of Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara in December 2020, granted by President Trump in exchange for Moroccan-Israeli normalization, was considered a major diplomatic victory for Rabat. And yet, 18 months later, Morocco is signing defense cooperation protocols that explicitly reduce dependence on American weapon systems and cultivate Chinese and Turkish alternatives. Why? Because Moroccan strategic planners assess that American recognition of Western Sahara sovereignty could be reversed by a future administration, that American security commitments are increasingly unreliable as domestic American politics become more polarized and isolationist, and the Chinese economic presence in Africa is permanent and expanding while American involvement is sporadic and conditional. According to data from the China-Africa Research Initiative at Johns Hopkins University, Chinese foreign direct investment in Morocco increased from $1.2 billion in 2015 to $8.7 billion in 2025. American investment in the same period decreased from $3.1 billion to $2.8 billion. The trend lines are unambiguous. The European dimension adds another layer. Morocco has historically been Europe's partner in managing migration flows from sub-Saharan Africa. Hundreds of thousands of migrants attempt to reach Europe through Morocco annually, either across the Strait of Gibraltar or through Spanish enclaves like Ceuta and Melilla. The European Union has paid Morocco hundreds of millions of euros to intercept, detain, and deport these migrants before they reach European territory. This arrangement has given Europe leverage over Moroccan policy. But according to the Rabat Conference agreements, Morocco is now receiving billions in infrastructure investment from Gulf states that comes without migration conditionality. The need for European payments decreases, European leverage decreases, and when Spain and France objected to Moroccan control over Western Sahara in diplomatic forums throughout 2024, Morocco responded by briefly reducing cooperation on migration enforcement, allowing thousands of migrants to reach Spanish territory in deliberate demonstrations of Moroccan leverage. The Guardian reported in March 2026 that European diplomats privately described Morocco as increasingly independent and less responsive to European pressure. That is diplomatic language for loss of control. If you are a European consumer watching energy prices climb, what is happening in Morocco is not just a North African story. It is a natural gas supply story. Morocco sits adjacent to the proposed Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline, a 4,000-kilometer project that would transport Nigerian natural gas across West Africa to Morocco and then potentially to Europe via undersea connections. The African Development Bank estimates this pipeline, if completed, could transport 30 billion cubic meters of gas annually. For context, that represents approximately 10% of current European natural gas imports. Who is financing feasibility studies for this pipeline? China. Who would build it? Likely Chinese state-owned engineering firms. Who would benefit from long-term supply contracts? Morocco, West African nations, and potentially China through equity stakes and supply guarantees. Who is excluded from this framework? European energy companies and American LNG exporters. The infrastructure investments announced in Rabat this week include $2 billion specifically allocated to Moroccan pipeline reception facilities and gas storage infrastructure in anticipation of this supply route. That is not speculative investment. That is preparation for operational reality. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. The Peloponnesian War, which lasted 27 years and consumed the Greek world from 431 to 404 BCE, pitted Athens and its maritime empire against Sparta and its land-based alliance. Both sides were exhausted. Tens of thousands died. Entire cities were destroyed. Economic networks collapsed. And who won? Persia. While Greeks fought Greeks, the Persian Empire under Artaxerxes II rebuilt its treasury, expanded its influence, and ultimately dictated the terms of Greek peace through the King's Peace of 386 BCE. Athens was humiliated. Sparta was contained. Persia controlled Ionian Greek cities and held effective veto power over Greek politics for the next 50 years. The parallel to the current moment is exact. The United States and its European allies have spent 20 years, trillions of dollars, and immense political capital on interventions in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria. China spent the same 20 years building ports, railways, and economic dependency across Africa, Asia, and Latin America through the Belt and Road Initiative. Morocco's transformation this week is not an isolated event. It is one node in a continental network where American influence is being systematically replaced by Chinese economic presence and multipolar security arrangements. The Americans and Europeans are still fighting their wars. China is winning the peace. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, Morocco becomes the Singapore of Africa. In this scenario, the infrastructure investments are completed on schedule. The Dakhla port becomes a major Atlantic Mediterranean transshipment hub, foreign investment accelerates, and Morocco emerges as the most economically developed nation in North Africa, with GDP per capita approaching $20,000 by 2035. This path requires sustained political stability, continued Moroccan success in suppressing Polisario resistance in Western Sahara, and Chinese willingness to continue infrastructure financing even if returns are uncertain. This is the optimistic scenario, and it is plausible if current trends continue. Probability 35%. Path 2, Morocco's gamble backfires as regional tensions escalate. In this scenario, Algeria, which views Moroccan control of Western Sahara as illegal occupation and sees Moroccan Gulf cooperation as encirclement, increases support to Polisario fighters. Conflict in Western Sahara intensifies. The Dakhla port project faces sabotage and security challenges. International investors become nervous. European migration cooperation collapses entirely, creating humanitarian crisis and diplomatic rupture. American policymakers, frustrated by Moroccan pivot toward China, reverse recognition of Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara, triggering political crisis in Rabat. This is the pessimistic scenario. Probability 25%. Path 3, and I believe this is where we are heading, Morocco successfully navigates a hybrid position. The infrastructure projects proceed but face delays and cost overruns typical of major construction in developing regions. Morocco maintains relationships with both Western and non-Western powers, but increasingly prioritizes Chinese and Gulf partnerships for economic reasons while keeping minimal security cooperation with the United States and France for insurance purposes. The Palestinian Solidarity Framework announced in Rabat remains largely symbolic as individual Arab states quietly pursue separate interests, but Morocco uses it to maintain credibility with Arab populations while avoiding concrete action that would provoke Israeli or American retaliation. Western Sahara remains contested but stable, with occasional Polisario attacks that do not threaten Moroccan control. This muddle-through scenario is most consistent with how regional politics actually function. Probability 40%. Here are the questions I want you to take away. First, can Morocco actually enforce coordination among Arab states on Palestinian issues when historical precedent shows that Arab unity collapses under pressure from individual national interests? Second, will Chinese investment in Morocco deliver actual economic transformation, or will it follow the pattern seen in other Belt and Road Initiative countries where debt increases, infrastructure sits underutilized, and local resentment grows? Third, how does Algeria respond to Moroccan empowerment? And does Algerian-Moroccan rivalry escalate into proxy conflict or even direct confrontation? Tell me in the comments what you think happens next with Algerian-Moroccan relations. Tell me if you believe the Rabat framework on Palestine is genuine strategic coordination or temporary political theater. We will keep tracking every development in Rabat, Algiers, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and Beijing as this transformation unfolds. That is what this channel does every single day. Subscribe now. Dari tazibe traatsin ti taksin Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand why North Africa matters more in 2026 than at any point since independence. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, and we will see you in the next analysis.